Okay, I have 6:30 p.m. I'm going to call the Newport City Council meeting to order for Monday, April 19th, 2021, 6:30 p.m. This is a remote meeting. All city council members are present via the remote access. In the city council room, we have the city manager, Laura Dogan. We have Public Works Director, Tom Bernier. We have City Police Chief Travis Bingham, we have Fire Chief John Harlemer, and we have our City Clerk Treasurer James Johnson. They are located in the City Council room. And with that, we will open the public hearing on the Newport City 5-year capital investment plan. And at this time, I will turn it over to the City Manager.
Thank you. Once a year, we go through the process of approving a 5-year capital plan, which is a tool for our long-term planning. What the capital investment plan does is it helps us anticipate long-term financial and physical impacts. The annual operating budget, which is different than the 5-year capital plan, provides for expenditures and revenues for a 1-year period. And that is complementary to this particular plan. This plan is under the authority of the Vermont Planning and Development Act out of Chapter 24, out of Title 24, Chapter 117, and it authorizes municipalities to adopt these budgets. Again, this allows us some guidance and direction. Everything that's in here is in alignment with the municipal plan as well as the waterfront and downtown master plan, and it helps us establish a schedule of investments. Each year is broken down into each department. Each department has goals that are approved within that year, assuming by the town budget at town meeting. Our 5-year capital plan is generated with input from each department head, and as I mentioned, coincides with our waterfront and downtown master plan. The goal is to maintain and physically improve our infrastructure, our equipment, our usability, our beautification, while continuing to meet all state and federal mandates in a cost-effective way. I thought the best way to go through this plan was to ask each department head to comment just a couple of sentences about the highlights of their particular section. So with that, I'm going to start with our road department for Tom Bernier to give just a brief highlight. From there, we'll go into the police department. We'll go into the fire department, and I believe that if Jess Booth is not on the phone tonight, we'll have to save her section till next meeting, which is perfectly okay. The timeline of adopting this requires 2 public hearings. Tonight is our first public hearing, and we'll take comments and shoot to have this either on the next council meeting or the meeting after that, depending upon what kind of feedback we get from the council tonight. So with that, I'm going to step aside and invite Tom Bernier to take over the screen.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. As we all know, every year changes depending on what type of wind we have. Some of the roads may change in the process of this capital plan. With the capital plan, it isn't just roads for me. I also have the long-range water and sewer projects, which coincide with the roads. So if you kind of reference the 2 on each year, you may see some streets that are on both lists. If we're going to rebuild a road, we usually put a new sewer line and change the services, or even put in some drainage before we repave that road. The other one that I do is another big highlight is our equipment every year, which is a big ticket item for the city, with $2 million worth of equipment, trying to change out stuff and keep it safe and inspected on the roads. It takes quite a bit every year to keep that budget going. It's quite a bit of stuff here. I'll keep it brief. If anybody has any questions, if you haven't looked over it, or if you want to ask me later, you're certainly welcome to. I'll leave the floor open.
On page 5 of the plan, under, I guess, the street paving,
Okay,
I see it says 72,236. I take it you were just subtracting out those just to get the $164? Did I do my math right?
yeah, I tried to incorporate in this, the committed funds that are still within the budget that were unspent, just to kind of show everybody where those funds are gonna go. And then the additional funds would actually be the budgeted amount, just to show everybody that, we had monies left over and where it's gonna go.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. I just wanted to clarification. That's perfect.
Yeah, no problem.
Council members have questions for Tom?
Okay, thank you.
I guess, nope. Okay, we'll move on.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for the attire. I literally came from coaching, so this is what you get tonight. So just to go over the police department's capital plan, I'll just hit on a few of our highlights here. So we currently have it set up so we replace one of our fleet vehicles every year. We have 5 in the rotation. And as you know, there's a lot of wear and tear on these vehicles. The mainline vehicles are run 24/7, so this seems to be, over the years, very cost effective, and it works out very well for us to keep on this plan. So that's how you see that broken down there. As far as the dispatch reserve fund goes, so when we got the grant for this equipment, it costs right around $286,000 to get that set up through the grant that we got. We're currently dispatching for 8 agencies, and you know, part of the agreement that they get is the quality of service that they get from us for dispatching, and we also have to make sure that we keep a quality of service for the equipment that we have. So we want to set some of that money aside for those kinds of things. And again, in the technology reserve fund, the same kind of deal with that. Obviously, the police department's has a big IT infrastructure within itself that we need to operate for our daily functions, for everything that we do. So there's money set aside for that in case something happens there. And we also had the locker room sinking fund that was put in as well. That did pass in the budget this year, but we want to make sure that over the next 5 years we have the money set aside to make that work as well. Then the last part of this you'll see is the Bulletproof vest replacement fund, and you know, with that, and here's just an example. In 2024, we're gonna have to replace 8 vests that for our patrol officers. These vests can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a piece. And then 22, we're gonna replace 2, 23, we're gonna replace 2, and then also in 24, we have to replace every single vest that's in our cruiser vest. And we can't guarantee the grant available for these. Sometimes, every year so far, we've been fortunate enough to have that, but we do have to set money aside in the event that we don't have the opportunity to apply for that grant. So that's kind of the down and dirty of the police department's investment plan. So I'll open it up for any questions.
Any questions for Travis?
Okay, I will pass it on to, is it the fire chief?
I think it's gonna be the fire chief, but I just wanna check to see if Jess is on here. Do we see Jess Booth?
I do not.
Okay, so we'll move on to John Harleman.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My budget, my 5-year plan comes down to 5 basic line items. for each year. 21, 22, we're looking to replace our ATV that's 15 plus years old. 22, 23, we like to pave the station parking lot. It's starting to crack and fail, and it needs to be done so that we don't have to go to the point of having to grind it and completely replace it. So it'll just be a finish coat over the top. After that, we're replacing our pumper. That is, will be 11 years old at that point in time. That's the big item on there. That's a $600,000 guesstimate. The price of trucks go up every single year. But in order to maintain our insurance rating, which we are a very low rating, which helps all of us with our fire insurance each year, we need to keep our first line pumper less than 10 years. So that's up for renewal. And then 24, 25, the brush truck, which I believe is a 2004. And then 25, 26 will be the cruiser. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And if anybody has any questions.
Any questions for John?
This is Melissa. I have a question to show my ignorance. What is a brush truck?
It's a four-wheel drive vehicle that we use for brush fires, grass fires. It's an off-road vehicle.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Anytime.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Looking at the 5-year plan and replacing the pumper tanker truck, how much longer do we have on the tower?
It's paid off, I believe. It was paid off this year. We were originally gonna attempt to do it this year, but for reasons we chose to put it off a year. So I believe we have a free year.
How old is the tower truck, John? Just curious.
2001. This vehicle's a 2011.
But what I'm looking at 5 years out, what you plan to do. When are we planning to get a new tower truck? It's not in here for the next 5 years.
To be honest with you, I would like to make it go 30. It has very low miles on it. It's been serviced and certified every single year. I don't think we have any problem doing that. Replacing it is probably going to be in the $1.2 million to $1.3 million range. So the value of the truck, unless we wanted to try and do something immediately, which I don't think is doable. It has a much greater life. The only problem with going out 10 years is the trade-in value on it. But the mechanic that was up and looked at it, and the gentleman that came and certified it, said it was in impeccable shape for the age. And so I would say maybe 27, 28 would be the time frame to start doing that. Historically, we've always bonded for it. We haven't done a sinking fund type deal. So that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So John, replacing the pumper tanker, you said that's 11 years old. So
Correct.
actually I'm assuming then the pumper tanker truck must have a higher impact on our insurance rating. That's why it needs to be replaced sooner than the tower truck, correct?
Correct. And able to maintain our insurance rating, our first line pumper needs to be 10 years or less. Historically, we've always rotated. We keep 2 pumpers and we rotate them every 10 years. We bring a new one on. We try to keep them 30 years, but we need to keep one within 10.
Okay. Very good. Other questions for John? Well, if not, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
All right, I heard some beeps. I just wanted to make sure Jess was either on or not on. So
I don't see a law.
Nope, I don't either. So we'll move on. The city beautification plan, very similar to what we had in last year's plan, just making sure there's no surprises in the budget and we're able to maintain the wonderful beautification plan that we have. Some issues that we've had in the past are that there are too many flowers. And I just want to point out how those flowers are built. Those are literally pennies on the dollar, and very cost effective the way that we purchase them directly from the supplier. So I want to assure people that whether we get 5 plants a pot or we put in 10 plants a pot, those are literally pennies on the dollar, which is one of the advantages of having Robert Gosselin in that position. The greenhouse is up and running. The waterfront parking and boatyard for 23-24 is the grant that we just filed that was approved at the last meeting. The wayfinding and kiosk for 24-25 is something we're working on with the downtown organization. And the streetscape amenities we hope to hit gradually, starting with this year's Parkwood project as part of the waterfront, as part of the intersection project that's due to start in the next couple of weeks. And that's really all I have for city beautification, if anybody has any questions.
Are there any questions on that aspect?
No.
If not, then Laura, I'll let you go on to the next item.
Okay, the next item is inviting Tom back over here to talk about water and sewer infrastructure.
Laura, did you want to go over anything for the municipal building?
Oh, I'm sorry. Of course. Thank you. I jumped ahead of myself. So the municipal building, as you know, is showing some wear and tear. And this year, we have some work being done on our bricks. If you look at the facade, there's some deterioration that can't wait too much longer for that repair. We've got some issues with the roof, and we're going to need to put some investment into the roof in the next year or two as well. Jim's been talking about the vault for a number of years. We're looking at that possibly in 24-25, but as you know, he's doing some record management right now. So we're going to be interested to see how that unfolds. And the rest of it is really routine maintenance on this building, which was built in what year, Jim? 1920 something? 1922. And we're just trying to keep it a focal point for the downtown that folks can be proud of.
Make a comment on the record.
Yep, Jim was going to make a comment on the record.
So have to keep a hard copy of all.
Yes, Jim just said they have to keep a hard copy of all their records. I think you're muted.
Thank you. Trying to keep myself muted because my clock was going off again. Any other questions for Laura regarding municipal building? If there aren't any, then we'll have Tom come back up to talk about water and sewer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops, what did I just do?
It's all good.
Well, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier about doing the road construction. A lot of our water sewer projects go hand in hand with any of the roads that we're going to work on. This year, just to touch on this year, we're hoping to do Hillside Street, Prospect, and Eastern, which would be a whole new sewer main. We'd also change out the water services to copper services if there's any old galvanized still in the streets. It's always been my goal to update everything before we rebuild and pave the road in hopes that we're going to get another 20, 30, 40 years out of a road without having to do anything except for put new pavement on it, keep a good wearing course. Other than that, next year we'll be leading into some bigger projects. If you're looking at the capital plan, Glen Road being one of them. We've got that sewer main we've had a couple issues on in the last few years, needs to be addressed. And then we have the siphons that cross the bay and the river, the Clyde River, which have been fully designed, and we're just looking to pencil in some time. Usually with the capital plan, we're typically pretty aggressive. I'm hoping I can get to all these this year. We do have some grants we're working on that we're gonna try to, finalize early this year and then jump onto these other projects. Other than that, things could change every year depending on, problems that we might see in the city. So this is always evolving and changing, but, other than that, if anybody has any questions about it, feel free to ask me.
Any questions for Tom regarding water and sewer capital plan? Okay, thank you, Tom. And with that, Laura, I guess the next, since Jess isn't here this evening, the next public hearing, unless there's any changes, would be the May 3rd, correct? If there's any changes, we wouldn't be able to have the second public hearing on May 3rd, because you have to warn you have to have a certain, there's like 15 days if you make changes, and that would push back the next public hearing if there are any changes.
What I would suggest is that we put this on for continuation of the public hearing at the next council for Jess to give her presentation. And we can take any feedback from the council members at that time. I can put it on for a possible vote, assuming there's no changes, but that gives us the leeway to put it on the following meeting or the meeting after that to meet the 15-day window.
Right.
So I think we can work with that timeline.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Mayor, I have a question for Mr. Hogan.
Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, whenever we do these next hearings, that's all well and good, but on page 2, I know eventually, once it's all adopted, we'll sign page 1, but on page 2, the last paragraph down there, I'm reading, the first public hearing will be held on Monday, 4 November 2019, and the second one, December 16, 19. As we go forward with our second public meeting, will that not get fixed?
Yes, that will get fixed. That's not a substantive change. I think that would meet the 15-day standard, but that will absolutely get changed.
Okay, no, I just read that and I said, well, we're looking back 2019, it shouldn't be on the page 2 if we're gonna sign page 1 sometime here in 2021.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Other items regarding the capital plan before we move on? Oh, okay. The next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of April 5th, 2021. Now we need a motion.
And Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin Charbonneau. I'll make that motion to approve the minutes of April 5th.
Motion made by Mr. Charbonneau. Is there a second?
Mr. Wilson, second.
Motion made by Mr. Charbonneau, seconded by Mr. Wilson to approve the minutes of April 5th. Any discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, motion carries. The next item is comments by members of the public. Okay. Next, then we'll move on. The next item is the annual ATV road access request and ordinance amendment. I'd like to, we have Scott Janess with us this evening, but I'll start out by basically saying, just to kind of recap from my observation from the past year. I thought it was successful. A lot of folks came into town. I spoke with business owners who said it gave them a little boost, especially during a summer of COVID. And so I believe we had very few issues regarding the ATVs. And the ordinance, we're proposing some amendments to the ordinance based upon what occurred last year. And at this time, I'd like to have the police chief, Travis Bingham, say a few words based upon his experience with the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can hit on some of the things that we saw from the enforcement side from last year. Obviously, anytime you implement something new, nothing's ever perfect. So for me to sit here and say that it was perfect, then that would be a lie. We had 25 complaints that came in throughout the year. 9 of those complaints were in May, 9 were in June, 3 in July, 3 in August, and 1 in September. So you can see the pattern. They kind of leveled off and declined as the year went on. And I think a lot of that just had to do with some of the newness wearing off, and people actually understood more of the routes that were actually designated within the city. We did issue 2 tickets, and 2 of those tickets were for people not riding on the right roads that were designated, and they were issued to city residents that lived within Newport trying to access the trail. So I don't know, as far as, my standpoint looking at it, a lot of the complaints that we had, out of those 25 complaints, a majority of them were people calling in because they maybe would see an ATV that wasn't on the right designated route. Lots of times, by the time we could get there, we weren't able to make contact with the person that was in violation. Obviously, sometimes it's hard to get a plate when these vehicles are driving by. You might be able to get a description of colors, things like that. So we weren't always able to make contact, but a majority of the complaints that we received were because people weren't on the designated routes. And from our standpoint, from mine, that was the biggest issue that I saw. And those are the complaints that we got for the year.
Okay, before I turn it over to Scott Janess, any questions for the police chief?
Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin Charbonneau.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Are there ATV complaints prior to the ordinance? Or is this all of a sudden we have an ordinance and now we have ATV complaints?
Yeah, so these 25 that I have here were all after the ordinance was in effect. Prior to the ordinance, I can certainly run those numbers, but it's very minimal, if any.
Right, but there was some, right?
Yes.
In other words, this ordinance did not bring ATV complaints. I mean, it brought some, but
Right.
they were here.
Right, yeah, I think part of that is just there's more eyes and ears out there, kind of watching and helping us out too. So I think that's part of it is the complaints that we would receive maybe prior to the ordinance, or if somebody did see an ATV, then obviously they knew that they weren't supposed to be on the road, they were called, but those are very few and far between. And after the ordinance was in place, the extra eyes and ears that we had to make sure people were following the laws, driving the speed limit on the right roads, that's why I think those numbers increased after the fact.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Travis, how many of those were noise complaints again?
Noise complaints, I don't remember having any noise complaints.
Any noise complaints?
All these complaints that we have, and I have them listed out here, are on designated routes that weren't part of the routes.
Okay,
Basically off the designated route, I guess.
okay. Other questions for Travis? Then I guess at
Yes,
this,
sir.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor, this is Scott Janis. Could I ask Travis a question?
I was just gonna turn it over to you, and so you can ask the question and then say a few things.
Okay, perfect. First thing I'd like to ask Travis, were there actually any speeding tickets issued to ATVs traveling through the city last summer?
No, there wasn't any speeding tickets issued, and in fact, like most of the traffic that we would see would have a line of cars behind them. They were actually very good from our perspective as far as following the speed limits.
So you could actually say ATVs kind of slowed your traffic down in and out of the city.
Yeah, you could argue that for sure.
Great. Okay, Mr. Mayor, City Council, thanks for having me on tonight. I think last year was a very, very successful season, with Newport being the only city in the state to allow ATV use. I think it worked out like better than we could have expected. I do know my conversations with a lot of the business owners, it definitely did bring a boost to their bottom line, especially in the COVID year we were having. I did see, actually, after the first weekend of ATV use within the city, it appeared to me like the city of Newport actually sprung to life. Like there was actually a heartbeat to the city, where people were excited to come into Newport City because we were welcome the ATV enthusiasts to be able to come in and patronize your businesses. And also see the beautiful city that you guys did last summer. I've never seen anything like it. The flowers were just totally, totally beautiful. And we got a lot of feedback from our riders about how beautiful the city of Newport is that some people never visited before. And we actually had visitors from outside the area come and stay at the Friday Beach campground. And I actually think with their business at the campground, it really helped Friday Beach campground last season stay afloat in the difficult times. With that being said, you know, when we do an ordinance in towns or cities, there's always some tweaking and some things that we could do to make things better and to solve some of the issues that we did see during last season of use. The council, if you do have the notice of amendments to the City of Newport Ordinance number 120 regulating all-terrain vehicles on town highways in front of you, I'd just like to make some statements on that particular document. And the first one would be section 4, letter A. What we would like to see and what the club is asking for from the city is to open up Newport City boundary line at Alderbrook Road to Highland Avenue. And the main purpose of adding this short section of the Alderbrook Road into our routes would be to give us another access route or access point coming from Coventry. With a big hit last year of Newport City and everybody wanting to travel to your beautiful city, we kind of put too much traffic on the lane road. And kind of overloaded the lane road with one of our only routes coming in from the west. So we would ask the city council if we could possibly, under section 4, letter A, add Alderbrook Road to the Newport City boundary to add another route, because we are just a little further down on the Alderbrook Road where we come in from Coventry, and we could make that connection very easily. Next would be letter B, and that is actually Western Avenue. Northeast across Main Street and continuing north on Science Avenue to Newport City boundary line. And the reason we would request this is as we're coming from Derby and we turn down by the church going towards the Public Works Department, it would only make sense, and I know a few of our riders last year missed the turn and they actually ended up going down Science Avenue. But actually listening to the police chief and saying that we did help slow traffic down in the city, we would think this would be beneficial to traffic on Science Avenue, because I understand and I've seen it at times myself that traffic does tend to go at a fast rate of speed down Science Avenue. And we'd be looking to try to help slow it down with the ATV use, because as we saw last summer, I could actually say 100% of ATV users abiding the speed limit within the city. Next is under letter I, and that would be Main Street to Railroad Square to Mount Vernon Street to the Newport City boundary line. And the request for this has come in from the restaurant at the golf course. They're under some new ownership, and they would really like to get this restaurant rolling up there at the country club, and they asked if we could possibly get the ATV trail to the restaurant. This would be very easily done because we come down off of Pine Hill now and we cross and go across the Crawford Road, so we could just bring it down and come down to the country club, to the restaurant, and then continue down into Newport City via Mount Vernon Street. Next, flip the page here. Section 5, we do know that there are some employees that do work in the city that like to ride their ATVs, UTVs to work, and we thought by adjusting the curfew to 7 a.m. versus 8 a.m. would allow them to do just that and to be able to get to work on their ATV if they choose so. Next is letter G, and this has come about because as of July 1st of last year, the state actually passed a law to make it mandatory that all operators and passengers must wear a DOT-approved helmet, whether they're on an ATV or in a side-by-side. The current ordinance stated ATVs, yes, must wear a helmet, but if we were in a side-by-side with a rollover protection system with a seat restraint, helmets were exempt. Now we're just, with a change to letter G, we're just abiding by the new state law, so now everybody must wear helmets. And then under the next one, under section 5, is letter J. And this would be the big one here, and this, I think, is going to solve a ton of the issues that we saw last year in the city. Because one of the biggest complaints that was fed to myself, to our club, and I know to the police department, was ATVs operating on streets where they weren't allowed. And I am going to tell you that my belief is 99.9% of these people were your own tax-paying residents just solely trying to get from their house to these proposed routes. I do know there's several. We got one of your residents lives on St. Laurent Street. He's a stone's throw away from the Public Works Department, where it is now legal to operate his ATV. By making your city residents actually trailer to the designated parking areas, there's a one of two things. First, it's totally inconvenience for a resident on St. Laurent Street to have to trailer his machine 200 yards to the Public Works Department. And secondly, what that does is we want to invite people from outside to use these trailheads and park within the city, not pack them with your city residents. So under J, what we would ask the council is any resident of the city of Newport and their invitees may operate ATVs on a town highway that connect the resident's property to the town highway listed in section 4, access purpose only. And that is to provide direct access to and from the resident in the city. And I think that's a good statement, or stated a proper way, because we want to state direct access, because we don't want someone just taking this in the wrong way and on Fernwood Circle, fire their ATV up and drive around the circle all day long. I don't think that's our intended purpose. Our intended purpose here with that change in section 5, letter J, is solely on the purpose of direct access to and from residents. With that said, I would like to thank the council and Mr. Mayor for allowing us the opportunity last season to be able to visit the beautiful city of Newport, Vermont. And we're hoping that we can travel through the city again this year and possibly make these amended changes to the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And with that, I can tell you the biggest complaints I had as the mayor, whether it was a phone call or email, were from residents who, from their home, cannot access the trails from their home. I know a couple of them told me they were pulled over and they were just trying to get to the trail. And so I think adding that section, and it won't be listed on any of the maps, it's just in the ordinance and it will be for the residents. And so I think that's a good addition to the ordinance. I also agree with the Sias Avenue, because I think coming in from Derby and then having to go down by the Public Works all the way through there, and then all the way up East Main to go to, say, Cumberland Farms for gas, I think it was, a good idea to add Sias Avenue. I also think opening up to the country club, that is a new business, and it actually would open it up both ways. Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Derby would allow, I think Derby allows them to come in from the other direction, and so I think that's a good addition. Other than that, I think overall, I think I say again, I think it worked well last year. If the council chooses to approve the ordinance, it really would not take, not the ordinance, the amendment to the ordinance, it really would not take effect until June 20th of this summer, between the period of, between the council approving it and the time it would take effect. And with that, I'm going to open up the questions from council members first.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I've got two things.
Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
So you're saying it'll open 22 June, but
June
section
20.
4, it says each be from 15 May till October 1st.
No, okay, let me clarify. The trails open May 15th, and then they close whatever the date is. It's the time that this amendment would take effect, is what I was trying to explain. It's the amendment basically the operation would be the same as last year until June 20th of this summer.
Okay, and the other one is for Mr. Jeanette. Once approved, were we going to see proper signage put back out there, or with the changes?
Yes, you will. Once the warning period's over, obviously we'll wait till the warning's over. As soon as it's over, proper signage will be put up to direct riders in the proper way.
Sounds good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions from city council members?
Yeah, this is Chris Vashon. With 5J, talking to a lot of people I know in Newport, the same as what Mr. Mayor was saying, where they would love that direct access, even though they're just off the main routes. They weren't allowed to drive that route, so I think adding J would definitely be very helpful. I do have a question for Mr. Janess, that the city of Newport residents riding those side roads would still have to be part of the clubs, right?
Correct. They'll still have to be registered with the state of Vermont and be a VASA and club member.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions?
Are you taking questions from the public now?
Yes, if you could state your name for the record, and yes, go
This
ahead.
is Jennifer Hopkins, and I live in Newport. I really have no problem with opening, with ATVs overall, or opening up the streets further to them. I do have a real problem with residents and their invitees, which means technically I could, let's say, rent my house to somebody who, joins the club, but they could run down the street anytime, and I think that just opens a can of worms. I don't mind if I could drive, but I don't think invitees is really appropriate unless accompanied by a city resident. And then the other question is, how do you know whether that ATV belongs on that street? So that's just my comment.
Okay. Would Travis like to maybe address the residential? I'm not sure if he could address the residential aspect.
Yeah, so I think as long as the invitee's a member of the club, that's what we kind of mulled over and tried to make, as fair as possible and try to enforce this stuff the best way we could. It's going to be hard for us to make this a residents-only, only have this open for residents, because there's no way I can tell by a sticker that's going to be placed on, or however we came up. It's hard enough to see the plates on these things when they drive by. So if we did residents only and had a sticker or something on there to try to make it aware that it was the residents having access to the trail, it's going to be very hard for us to enforce. And as far as the direct access goes, the reasoning behind some of that was to try to prevent the stuff that Scott had talked about, as far as the looping around some of the, the streets, like Fernwood Circle, for example. Like, we just tried to make it so you could leave your house, have access to the trail, and then you could come back home. And if you had a friend, family, whatever, that wanted to come visit you, we didn't want to hinder their ability to be able to have access in the Newport and not be able to come see their family, friends, whatever, at their house. So that was the, kind of some of the thinking behind that.
Can I ask one other question?
Go ahead,
Travis,
Jennifer. No, go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, then why don't you just effectively open every single street in the city of Newport? Because is there a street that perhaps does not have a residence on it that could bring an invitee to open it to ATVs? I mean, why bother with something that is literally, I could get angry and say, there's a resident on my street who has a friend visiting, or maybe not. It could be somebody who doesn't belong here. I think you might as well open up every street and be done with it, because that's effectively what you're doing.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's what this is trying to accomplish. We're just trying to make the language that's going to be in there so we don't have the people that are just driving around in circles for hours and maybe abusing what the point of this whole thing is, and that's to get to and from the trail within the city.
Right, the goal was not to have every street as part of the trail system. The goal was to just basically to allow access to the trails, because I know Travis mentioned Fernwood Circle, and I can remember the complaint a couple of years ago from a person going round and around and around and around. And so we didn't want that. I know when this was discussed, we definitely didn't want that to happen. Or like to someone say, okay, I'm just going to go from, I'll say my street, around the loop, around, Sias, and just keep going around and around. It was basically just to make it for access to the main trails. And the city streets will not be listed on the maps. It's only the actual authorized trails that'll be on the maps that the membership would see, or people coming from outside would see. They would only see the official trail, the official streets that are part of the trail system.
Correct. And I was going to point that out, Mr. Mayor, so I'm glad you touched on that.
And also the signage that'll be posted will indicate that all the streets are open. It'll just indicate specifics. And I think by doing it this way, it's an excellent way. It won't be on the maps, and riders from outside the city should not be off the designated trail.
That's correct.
So technically, Chris could go either way on his street to access Sias Avenue if he owned an ATV.
That is correct.
Or you could go either direction, Paul, on the same streets and access the trail.
If I had an ATV, I could get down to the end of Coben Street to get on the proposed Sias Avenue, which would become part of the trail system, yes. Because this kind of came up when we initially discussed it, because I can remember Bobby George, I think he's like maybe 50 yards, if that, from where he lives to the official trail. And in theory, he was supposed to truck his ATV down to an official trailhead in order to get onto the trail system. Or there's a gentleman off of Farrant Street on the other side who I know, in order for him to use his ATV on the trail system would technically have to truck it to a trailhead. And so this is going to eliminate that for the city residents.
And they're invitees.
Right,
Yeah, don't forget that, and invitees. Okay, thank you.
right. But if I invited someone to my house and I had an ATV and they parked here, they could ride down the street too, yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, state your name, please.
Dennis Chanat, St. Lawrence Street, Newport.
Go ahead.
I know that St. Lawrence Street was singled out in the commentary, and I don't have a copy of the ordinance in front of me, so I don't know what the wording exactly is. But you are basically opening up the entire city for access to a place where they can get onto the trails, correct? So if somebody down on Allendale Street wants to go down to the city garage, they can drive all the way down Bluff Road, connect onto Proudy Drive, and then go on to Union Street. Is that correct? Is that what
That
you're
is
saying?
correct. That is correct.
Okay, so then the entire city then is being opened up for use on city streets.
Yes,
Okay, I just
but
want
it's not,
clarification.
but it's not, just to clarify again, it's not going to be on the map system. It's basically anyone coming in, they would know that every street is not part of the actual trail system.
But all the city residents would know that because they're gonna have to be able to have access to
Right,
the main
right.
route. Okay, thank you.
That is correct, yes. The bottom line, I guess for me, is we were trying to make it easier for our residents. I didn't realize how many of our residents actually own side-by-sides and ATVs until we implemented this last summer. And I started hearing from people who basically were hoping that we would make these changes. Other questions or comments from anyone? I know the city manager have anything that she wanted to add?
You can tell by looking at me. I wanted to address the study committee that the downtown organization had offered to do. In our conversations, it had seemed that this was a success and that we're moving in a more a direction with a lot of vitality. And I wanted to put out there that I just wondered if that study committee was still needed.
To me, looking at it and hearing from the chief and from Scott Janess and speaking with business owners and things like that, I don't see a need for it. In my opinion, the study shows that the level of complaints dropped. I think in the beginning it was education, and just seeing, how it went from, I guess it was 9 the first month, and then it dropped to like 2 or 3, whatever, near the end. I don't see a need for a study committee, in my opinion. And I know the business owners I spoke to said it helped them quite a bit. You'd go down on a weekend and you'd see how they were going to the local businesses, and it was definitely a boost during last summer with the height of COVID. And so that's just my thought on it.
I sense that others may feel the same, and what I'd like to do is recommend to the downtown board that they suspend their efforts around that study committee. Certainly if there's a need in the future, I'm sure they'd resume that, but I think that sounds like a wise move, and folks can put their energy into marketing and promotions. Thank you, that's all I had.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, this is Melissa. I don't think the downtown group needs to, do a study either. Looking at what folks predicted was going to happen, that there would be blood in the streets and no one would come downtown and there'd be no parking. you know, I don't believe there's evidence of that. I don't think, you know, our complaints or things that happened were people on the streets that they weren't supposed to be on. Didn't hear that there were any accidents. Noise didn't seem to be a complaint problem. Parking, whenever I was downtown and I saw ATVs, there would be 2 ATVs in one parking slot. So that seems to me to lose, that's like more people, less parking slots being used. You know, overall for a first season, I think it was approached carefully, and I think that we can proceed, you know, again, taking another step forward to making it workable or more workable for our city residents, which is something I would like to do. And living on one of the streets that's in this ordinance to be open, Sias Avenue, we did have ATVs come down last year. I was not one of the 25 complaints. I barely even noticed that they went by, and which was positive for me because I had a fear in the back of my mind that ATVs were going to be really, really annoying. But actually, they're less so than the motorcycles and many of the trucks that go by. So they're quieter, and they were going, you know, 25 miles an hour, which was kind of nice to see on Sias. So I think we're in a good spot right now. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions from anyone? Okay, if there aren't any, I would entertain a motion to approve the amendments to the ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin Charbonneau.
Go
I'll
ahead.
make that motion. I'll make the motion to approve the amendments to the ordinance.
Motion has been made to approve the amendments to the ATV ordinance. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Charbonneau, seconded by Ms. Pedersen. Discussion on the motion. Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. Now this will be entered into the minutes and it will be posted in 5 locations around the city, and it will also be posted in the newspaper. So it will be, the residents will be, basically it will be in the newspapers and posted in 5 locations. And then during that time, people can make additional comments on the ordinance, or if they have concerns, they can come forward. Am I correct, Laura, on that aspect, or Mr. Johnson?
It's, yes, and it's just on the amendment, not on the ordinance. Just
Right,
on.
that's what I meant to say, the amendment, because the ordinance stands, it's the amendment that they would comment on, right? Right, okay. All right,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, go ahead, state your name.
Chris Roy, Newport Daily. When does this season open for the ATVs?
May 15th.
May 15th. And this question might be for the police chief. The couple dozen complaints the police department received, were they all unique complaints, or were they from some from the same people?
I'll let the chief answer that, because he has the stats in front of him.
Yeah, some of them were, we had one that was, oh, here's some feedback going on.
Let me unmute.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so some of them, we had one that made 5 different complaints from the same resident. And then there was a couple other that were the same as well, but that was it, just a few.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. All right,
Mr. Mayor, Scott Jennings,
yes.
I would just like to thank you and thank the council for a great working relationship, and we look forward to a great relationship in the future.
I also want to thank you, Scott, and all the ATV riders who came to town. They were very, in my opinion, very well behaved and respectful, and I look forward to another successful season. And I want to thank the police chief for his great statistics on keeping track of things, and I think that's extremely helpful when it came to making these proposed changes.
That's great. This is Laura. I just want to remind the council members, they'll need to come in and sign that tomorrow, please. Okay? The housekeeping details of passing a ordinance amendment is going to require signatures.
Yes.
Thank you. Great.
Okay. Moving on. The next item is to appoint a representative and 2 alternates to the Communications Union District.
And this is a leftover from the last meeting when we had the presentation from Mr. Carlson about the advantages of joining the Communication Union District. And the council voted to join at the last meeting, and part of our responsibilities is to appoint a representative and 2 alternates. So during the past couple of weeks, we were able to successfully find some folks who are willing to assume these positions. And for representative, Woody Page has volunteered to hold that position. And for alternate number 1, Chris Vachon has agreed to sit in that position, and alternate number 2 would be Paul Manette. So I feel very lucky that people stepped forward to be able to assume that role, and want to thank them in advance.
And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Wilson, make the motion that Woodman Page be our rep, alternates Chris Vachon, and number 2, Paul Manette.
Motion made by Mr. Wilson. Is there a second?
Kevin Charbonneau, I'll second.
Made by Mr. Wilson, seconded by Mr. Charbonneau. Discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
And thank you on behalf of the Communications Union District. I know they're going to be excited. Appreciate that.
Okay, moving on.
Sure.
Go ahead.
This is for an alibi. Will this be an annual motion, or what's the time frame on this? I
Annually.
mean, like,
Yeah,
It's-
it's third paragraph, each member town shall appoint annually on or before the last Monday in April. So we've hit the target.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next item is the annual LEMP, or Local Emergency Plan. Corrections have been made, and corrections were made right up. This morning, I found a couple little things, and the city manager corrected them after I chatted with her on the phone about it, and I believe we have the final version with all the corrections.
Well, we found one more last name, and that is that the high school contact last name is Young, not Miller. So what I would ask is the council to approve it, knowing that what's going to be submitted is one more correction, and that is that the Miller will be Young. The name of the high school contact is Chris Young. So does this have to be put in by, I'm looking at Chief Harlem, it's got to be submitted by May 1st? Yeah. This is our last opportunity. We've got to have this submitted by May 1st.
Questions from council members?
Kevin Charbonneau, and I'm sorry. On page 9, for the state police lieutenant, don't believe it's Walt Smith. Travis would know who it is.
Deb Munson.
Okay, Munson. And that was something that happened recently.
Yeah, Travis just informed me that it's Deb Munson that's doing it now.
Okay,
So I'll make that change also, and I'll have it here by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
okay. Sorry, I didn't see it earlier. I apologize.
I'm the ones that apologize. I looked at this thing so many times, I'm not even seeing missing stuff, so I appreciate everybody's help in getting it all together.
And the way things are going, we could have a new lieutenant by 3 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the way I feel this document has worked, so, but I'll do that first thing in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Any other corrections before I entertain a motion to approve it with the two name changes? Then at this time, I would accept a motion to approve the local emergency management plan with the two corrections. It's Chris, I almost said Miller, it's Chris Young, who's the contact at the high school. He's the principal, and it's Deb Munson, for the state police. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the annual LEMP with the corrections.
Motion made by Mr. Vashon. Is there a second?
Kevin Charbonneau, all second.
Made by Mr. Vashon, seconded by Mr. Charbonneau. Discussion on the motion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, motion carries. Very good, thank you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. New business, I don't have any new business. Ms. Pedersen, any new business?
No new business.
Okay, Mr. Charbonneau,
No new business.
Mr. Wilson,
No new business.
Mr. Vashon.
Nothing from me.
Okay. Laura, City Manager, Ms. Dogan.
No, thank you.
Does Mr. Johnson have any new business?
No.
Okay. Moving on then, old business. I don't have any old business. Ms. Pedersen?
No, old business.
Okay. Mr. Charbonneau?
No old business.
Okay. Mr. Wilson?
No old business.
No old business, okay. And Mr. Vashon?
Nothing from me.
Nothing, okay. Ms. Dogan?
No, thank you.
And Mr. Johnson?
No, thank you.
Okay. The next meeting of the City Council will be a remote meeting, and it will be held Monday, May 3rd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:38 p.m.
So moved.
This is Kevin Charbonneau, I'll make that motion.
I heard Mr. Vashon made the motion. I'll put you down as a second, Mr. Charbonneau, okay?
Ah, okay.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.